If you're the woman who has ever stood 2 steps behind your own husband while someone else shook his hand, if you've ever smiled politely while your work was folded into his shadow, this story is for you. It's for the women who built their careers in quiet, who learned to clap for everyone else, who were told that being supportive was more important than being seen. Okay, let me tell you what happened the night I stopped being just his wife. My name is Aaliyah Brooks Winters, and for 6 years, at every single professional event in Chicago's architectural scene, my husband introduced me the same way. This is my wife. That's it. Not she's a structural engineer. Not she leads seismic design for mid-rise urban developments. Not even she works with me. Just my wife. And the night I won the Illinois Structural Innovation Award, the biggest honor of my career, he was sitting in the audience, watching. But before I get to that night, you need to understand how we got there, because this wasn't one moment. It was a tradition, a pattern, a quiet erosion that happened over years, and it started long before the award. I grew up on the south side of Chicago in a brick 2 flat that always smelled like starch and frying onions. My dad was a transit mechanic. My mom was a church secretary. We weren't poor, but nothing was ever wasted. Not food, not money, not opportunities. And in our family, there was an unspoken rule for the girls. Be accomplished, but never intimidating. My grandmother used to say, "A smart woman builds the house. A wise woman lets the man put his name on it." I swear she said that like scripture. I didn't think much of it when I was younger. I was too busy taking apart radios and rebuilding them. Too busy sketching bridges in the margins of my notebooks. Too busy dreaming about steel beams and load calculations. Engineering wasn't common where I grew up, especially not for black girls, but I loved it. The smell of concrete dust, the hum of drafting software, the clean logic of forces and tension and compression, and I was good at it. I met Daniel Winters in graduate school at Northwestern. He was studying architecture, the charismatic, confident, tall in that way that made rooms part for him without him even trying. He loved that I was brilliant. At first, he'd tell people, "She's the smartest person in our program." He'd brag about my internship with a structural firm downtown. He'd kiss my forehead while I ran calculations at 2 a.m. It felt equal. It felt modern. It felt like partnership. We got married at 28 in a converted loft in the West Loop. Exposed brick, Edison bulbs, craft cocktails. All our friends said we were a power couple. And maybe we were, but somewhere between year 1 and year 3 of marriage, something shifted. It started small. At his firm's holiday party, someone asked what I did. Before I could answer, Daniel smiled and said, "She keeps me grounded. I'd be lost without her." Everyone laughed. I laughed too. It sounded sweet. Then came the AIA Gala the following spring. A room full of architects, developers, city officials. I had just been promoted to lead structural analyst on a public library project. A huge deal. We approached a group of investors. Daniel shook hands, gave his name, his firm. Then he touched my back lightly and said, "And this is my wife." That was it. The men nodded politely. One of them said, "Ah, you must be very patient." Patient. Like I was babysitting a genius. I opened my mouth to say I was actually overseeing the structural framework of the new South Loop Library. But Daniel was already mid-sentence, discussing facade concepts. I swallowed it. It felt rude to interrupt. Have you ever swallowed your own introduction like that? Like you were being impolite for wanting to exist in the room? Tell me in the comments if you felt that, because I know I'm not the only one. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself my work spoke for itself. I told myself marriage meant sometimes stepping back. And then came the first real cut. Year 4 of our marriage. I had spent 8 months developing a cost-efficient lateral support system for mixed-use buildings in high-wind corridors. It was innovative. It reduced material waste by 12%. I presented it internally at my firm. They loved it. One of the senior partners suggested we collaborate with an architectural firm for a pilot project. Guess which firm they approached? Daniel's. I was excited, nervous, but excited. We'd finally be publicly working together. We had the joint presentation at his firm's office. Glass walls, sleek conference table, skyline view. I walked in with my binder, my slides, my data. Daniel had already set up. When it was my turn to speak, I started explaining the structural logic, wind load distribution, core reinforcement modifications, and Daniel interrupted. "Oh, what she means," he said, smiling at the clients, "is we've found a cleaner way to slim the profile without compromising integrity." What she means. He rephrased my explanation 3 more times during that meeting, each time shorter, simpler, until it sounded like his idea. At the end, one of the developers clapped Daniel on the shoulder and said, "Brilliant thinking." I was standing right there. I drove home in silence, hands tight on the steering wheel, Lakeshore Drive blurring beside me. When we got home, I said carefully, "It felt like you were translating me." He laughed. "Ali, you get technical." I was just making it digestible. Digestible. Like I was too much. He kissed my forehead, and I let it go. Now I need to tell you about my niece, Nia. She's my older sister's daughter. The first time she appears in this story, she's 10 years old, sitting cross-legged on my living room floor with a Lego set spread out like a city explosion. She adored Daniel. He'd lift her high in the air, call her future CEO. One afternoon, she watched me sketching structural diagrams at the dining table. "Auntie Allie," she said, "why don't people on TV show girls building skyscrapers?" I laughed. "Some do." She frowned. "Not like boys." Daniel, without looking up from his phone, said casually, "Well, architecture is more creative. Engineering is more behind the scenes." Behind the scenes. Nia nodded slowly. I saw it land, and something twisted in my chest. That was the first time. Years 5 and 6 were quiet. Painfully quiet. Daniel's firm grew. Mine did too. But at every industry mixer, every groundbreaking ceremony, every charity gala, "This is my wife." Never my title. Never my role. Just proximity. I started noticing something else. When people Googled our names, his website came up polished and detailed. Mine? Bare bones profile. So I changed that. Without telling him. I began publishing white papers under my full name, Aaliyah Brooks Winters, P.E. I spoke on panels. I networked independently. I built relationships outside his orbit, quietly, alone. At night, after he fell asleep, I'd sit on the couch with my laptop glowing against the dark, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the apartment. I was tired, but I was building something he couldn't narrate. If you've ever built in silence while someone else took the spotlight, drop a comment. I want to know what you were building. The second time Nia appears, she's 13. Middle school science fair. She invited me. Her project? Wind-resistant tower models. I almost cried when I saw it. But when the judges came around, she deferred to the boys in her group. One of them explained everything. She stood back. Afterward, I asked why she didn't present more. She shrugged. I didn't want to seem bossy. Bossy. 13. I asked where she learned that. She hesitated. Then she said, "Dad says guys don't like girls who act like they know everything." I felt heat behind my eyes. Later that night, Daniel and I were at yet another networking dinner. He introduced me. You can guess how. And suddenly I saw Nia at 13, standing half a step back, mirroring me. Do you know how devastating it is to realize someone younger is learning smallness by watching you? Tell me honestly, have you ever seen your silence echo in a younger girl? That was the second crack. Then came the email. Subject line, "Congratulations, finalist." I had been nominated, secretly by a colleague, for the Illinois Structural Innovation Award. I didn't tell Daniel, not at first. When I finally did, he smiled. "That's great, babe. Proud of you." Babe. He asked when the ceremony was. The same night as the Midwest Architecture Leadership Gala. He frowned. That's unfortunate timing. Unfortunate? For who? He said we should attend his gala. It's bigger. I said I was going to mine. We didn't fight, but something shifted. The third time Nia appears, she's 16. She came over one Sunday afternoon, SAT prep book in hand. She told us she was thinking of applying to engineering programs. My heart soared. Daniel smiled thinly. Engineering is intense, he said. Architecture might give you more flexibility later, especially if you want a family. I stared at him. Nia looked at me, and then she asked quietly, Auntie Ollie, do you ever feel like your job is smaller? Smaller, that word, that was the breaking point, because I saw it so clearly. If I stayed quiet, she would learn to shrink. If I kept smiling politely at my wife, she would learn to erase herself, and I could not live with that. Not even kidding. That question from her felt louder than any award ever could. Have you ever had a younger girl ask you something that forced you to look at your own compromises? Drop a comment if you know that feeling. That night, after she left, I made 3 decisions. First, I confirmed my attendance at the award ceremony. Second, I contacted a lawyer. Third, I separated my professional branding completely, legally, from Daniel's firm. Our previous collaborative intellectual property? I ensured every document reflected my authorship. Clean, documented, undeniable. It wasn't dramatic. It was structural, like reinforcing a beam before it collapses. Now, the night of the award. This is where everything changes. The ballroom was at the Art Institute. High ceilings, marble columns, warm golden light reflecting off polished floors. The air smelled faintly of champagne and expensive perfume. I wore a deep emerald gown, structured clean lines, minimal jewelry, hair pulled back. I looked like myself, not an accessory. Daniel chose to attend my ceremony after all, said he could swing by before his gala. He wore a charcoal suit. We arrived together. At the entrance, a board displayed finalist names. Aaliyah Brooks Winters, P.E. Seeing my full name, bold, centered, made my throat tighten. Inside, clusters of engineers and city officials mingled. Someone approached. "Daniel!" a man exclaimed, an architect we both knew. Daniel straightened, ready. The man turned to me. "And you must be Aaliyah Brooks Winters. I've read your wind corridor paper." Daniel blinked. "Yes," I said calmly. "That's mine." The man shook my hand firmly. "Impressive work." Daniel smiled, but it was tight. We moved further in. Another colleague hugged me. "I'm so glad you're here. You deserve this." Deserve. Daniel had never used that word about my career. We took our seats, rows of round tables, white linens, soft, clinking glassware. Daniel checked his phone twice. I felt strangely calm. When they announced finalists, my heart pounded in my ears, like standing near train tracks as a train approaches. And the Illinois Structural Innovation Award goes to Aaliyah Brooks Winters. There's a split second in moments like that where sound disappears. Then the room erupted. Applause, chairs scraping. I stood slowly. I didn't look at Daniel immediately. I walked to the stage, heels steady on marble. The lights were bright, but warm. The presenter handed me the Crystal Award. Cool, heavy, solid in my hands. Solid. Like proof. I stepped to the podium. I could see everything from up there. The tables, the city lights through tall windows, Daniel in the third row. Watching. I took a breath. "My name is Aaliyah Brooks Winters," I began. "Not Allie, not babe, not wife. My work focuses on structural systems that protect communities from wind damage while reducing material waste." I spoke clearly, not simplified, not translated. I thanked my firm, my mentors, my parents, and then I paused. The room quieted further. "I want to thank my niece, Nia," I said. Daniel shifted. "She asked me recently if my job was smaller than someone else's, and I realized that sometimes we let people describe us in ways that shrink us. Tonight, I'm proud to stand here, not behind anyone, and say that engineering is not behind the scenes. It is the bones that hold everything up. You could hear the air. No one moved. I continued, softer. To every young woman watching someone else take credit for her work, your name deserves to be said, fully. Applause again, but different, stronger. I stepped down. As I returned to the table, Daniel stood halfway, uncertain whether to hug me. He settled for a tight smile. "Congratulations," he said. 2 syllables too late. Throughout the rest of the evening, people approached me. Only me. They asked about my designs, future projects, consultations. Daniel sat beside me, silent more often than not. At one point, someone asked how we balanced being 2 leaders in the same industry. Before Daniel could answer, I said evenly, by respecting each other's names. The man nodded thoughtfully. Daniel didn't speak. When we left the ballroom, the night air outside was cool, almost electric. Streetlights reflected off the pavement. The city hummed. In the car, he finally said, "You embarrassed me up there." I turned to him. I said my name. He exhaled sharply. "You didn't mention me." 6 years, and that was his complaint. I looked out the window at the skyline, steel and glass and structure. "You never mentioned me either." Silence filled the car like fog. That night, I slept peacefully for the first time in years. 3 months later, I filed for separation. It wasn't explosive. It was documented, structured, financially clean. I kept my intellectual property, my projects, my firm role. He kept his. No one could argue the paperwork. It was airtight. The final scene? Nia came over after receiving her engineering program acceptance letter, University of Illinois. She ran into my new condo. Smaller, yes, but filled with light. "Auntie Ali," she yelled, waving the envelope. We sat at my kitchen table, sunlight pouring over blueprints spread across it. She held my crystal award in her hands. "It's heavy," she said. "Yeah," I smiled. "It is." She looked at me differently now, not smaller, not behind. "Do you think I can win one someday?" she asked. I met her eyes. "I think you can build things no one's imagined yet." On the shelf behind her, the award caught the light, scattering small rainbows across the wall. Solid. Visible. Mine. And that's the thing no one tells you. Revenge doesn't always look loud. Sometimes it looks like saying your own name into a microphone. Sometimes it looks like paperwork signed in calm ink. Sometimes it looks like a 16-year-old girl deciding she doesn't have to stand half a step back. If this story felt familiar, if you've ever been introduced as just anything, share this with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to her untold revenge, because somewhere out there is a woman still swallowing her introduction, and maybe tonight she'll decide to say her name.